Hello again. I want to go on looking at the Roman epistle, and I'm going to look at the next 8 verses, and these are really the second part of Paul's introduction. It will begin to move towards the beginning of his main thesis throughout this letter, but it's really still part of his greeting. So let's read from Romans 1 verse 8 to 15. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers, making request if by some means now at last I may find a way in the will of God to come to you. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift, so that you may be established, that is, that I may be encouraged together with you by the mutual faith both of you and me. Now I do not want you to be unawares, brethren, that I often planned to come to you, but was hindered until now, that I might have some fruit among you also, just as among the other Gentiles. I am a debtor both to the Greeks and to barbarians, both to wise and to unwise. So, as much as is in me, I am ready to preach the gospel to you who are in Rome also. And then, of course, he moves on to his great comments about faith and so on. But here you have this, in this short passage, Paul is expressing his heart to them. And it's an amazing thing. He has longed to come to Rome to share with them the things that God had shown him. This was not some passing fancy. This has been something on his heart, it would appear, for years. He says in this context he's been hindered. Now we know in other places he says Satan had hindered him. But here, if you go to the end of the book, you find in chapter 15 that he says that the work of preaching the gospel in other places has kept him back from coming to Rome. But his heart is to come to see them, to share with them, to encourage them, to build them up, and to bless them. What a wonderful thing that on this man's heart for some years had been this longing to visit Rome and to preach to the Christians in Rome, that they should have a better and fuller and deeper understanding of the gospel, and to be able to press on in their walk with the Lord more perfectly. Oh, that we all would have a heart to be a blessing to others, to want to share the good things of Jesus Christ with others. Now I want to pick out just some of the specific points Paul makes as we go through this passage. And he starts, and this is almost his first comment. He's done an introduction, but he says first, and what's his first comment? I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all. That's an amazing thing. You know, I'm sure that if first of all, when we thought of other people and we thought of other Christians, if the first thought in our mind was, thank God for these people, I'm sure it would change so much of the attitudes that we find sometimes in churches. We need to be thankful for one another. Or we may not be on the same place or in the same stage of our lives. But here Paul is writing to believers who he does not know and said, I'm thankful for you. What a wonderful thing. What a great start. I'm thankful for you guys. And he goes on and says, your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. They had come to this place of believing, and it was well known. They were not sort of half-hearted, hidden Christians. They had believed, and it was known around the world. Of course, in his time, he would probably talk about the Roman Empire, but it was known throughout the empire about the believing Christians in Rome. And then he goes on and he talks about, I serve God with my spirit in the gospel of his Son. You know, there is a starting point. When you become a Christian, God changes your spirit. And the starting point of your service is your spirit before God. That your spirit is subject to him, it's yielded to him, it's worshipping him, it's bowed before him. And you may be incapable physically of getting on your knees, but spiritually your knees are bowed to the Son of God. And Paul says, I serve with my spirit. And with the rest of him, he was physically preaching, he was constantly traveling, but the starting point of his service was from his spirit in the way God had dealt with him. This is without ceasing, I make mention of you always in my prayers. Here's some people that Paul had never met. There are other people, like the Colossians, that he'd never met. And he writes to them, they were on his heart. But he says, I'm making mention of you always in my prayers. Oh, that we all had a list of people that we constantly reminded God about. Lord, look after them, keep them safe, protect them, stop them from being deceived by the evil one, draw them on after yourself, deliver them from temptation, deliver them from evil. Oh, that we should all have a list of people that we pray for, that we lift up to the Lord, that we encourage before the throne of grace. And here he says, without ceasing, I haven't given up on you. I've constantly reminded God about you, brought my requests to him. What a wonderful thing. And he goes on and says, I'm asking that I can come and see you. And isn't it interesting that sometimes we have to ask God to allow us to do the things that are on our heart. And in a sense, he could say, well, the gospel has kept me busy in other places, but I've been asking God that he would release me from the responsibilities I have, or that I could finish the work that I had, and that I could now come and minister to the Romans. Now at last I'm making request. Now at last I may find a way in the will of God to come to you. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift, so that you may be established. You know, this is the heart of this man of God. He wanted to make sure that these Christians were firmly built upon the rock, that their confidence and trust in God was absolutely secure. And isn't that wonderful that that was this man's heart? Oh, that our heart for one another should be, I want you, brother or sister, to be absolutely established. And he goes on and says, that is, that I may be encouraged together with you by the mutual faith both of you and me. You know, it's wonderful that actually the stronger your faith is, the more it's an encouragement to other people. He was saying, even you Romans, that will be an encouragement to me as an apostle when I can see face to face your faith. You don't be afraid to maintain your faith in the Lord. You will encourage others, and the consistency of your lifestyle will be a blessing to other people, even to apostles, if it has to be that. And so he talks about being hindered from coming to them. He longs to have some fruit among them as he has with other Gentiles. Don't forget, Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles. And then he goes on and says, I am a debtor both to the Greeks and to barbarians, both to wise and to unwise. What does he mean when he says I am a debtor? I have been entrusted with something that I owe to them. I've been entrusted by the Lord with the message of the gospel, and I have to fulfill my responsibility to deliver that to these people. What people? Well, he says Gentiles, and then he goes on and breaks it down into the Greeks and the barbarians. And of course, this is the time of the Roman Empire. The Greeks you would think of as the educated, the sophisticated people from Greece, from Rome and so on. The barbarians were the people outside the Roman Empire. They would, in fact, in a few hundred years be the ones that bring the Roman Empire to an end. But he says, but regardless of a person's standing in society or whatever else, their intellect, their capabilities, their sophistication, whether they have it or they don't, I have a responsibility to deliver to them the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. To the wise and to the unwise, it doesn't matter your standing in any part of society, whether you're near the top of society or the lowest of the low, whether you're a fool or whether you're wise, it doesn't matter. The gospel is to be preached to every creature under the sun. And the responsibility is always on our hearts. How will we respond to what we hear? And Paul says, I have this responsibility to deliver the gospel to as many people as will hear it. So, as much as is in me, I am ready to preach the gospel to you who are in Rome also. And of course, he gets there eventually, not the way we expect. He gets there in a very different way than I think he expected. And that we can read towards the end of Acts. But he got there, all right. But as he goes on from this point, he begins to develop the doctrine, the understanding of the gospel in quite some detail, one of the most wonderful books of the New Testament. And we'll look into that in more detail in later weeks. But Paul is writing things, and of course, having written to them and then later appearing to them, I'm sure they had lots of questions. What does this mean? How does this fit in? What does how do you explain this aspect? And it's wonderful when you don't just get the letter, but you get the person coming that you can ask questions of. You can delve into the depths of what they were trying to say. And as I said last week, there wasn't the opportunity to write a large book on this. In fact, I think one of the commentators, one of the old commentators, their introduction to the book of Romans was longer than the book itself, because in Paul's time there wasn't the opportunity to write long word process documents. But to have him with them, to be able to ask him questions, to get him to explain, would have been a great blessing to them. They would indeed have been encouraged. And hopefully as we look into the rest of this book, our own hearts will be encouraged. So God bless you. Let's just pray. Father, I pray that you be with everyone that hears these messages, Lord. Thank you for the love that Paul had for these people. And I pray our hearts will be encouraged to encourage others and to bless others and to love others that love you, Lord. And we do thank you for your grace and your goodness to us. Amen. Now don't forget, there's a subscribe button if you want to follow this channel. There'll be a playlist if you want to look at any of the other sermons. And we look forward to seeing you again. But bye for now. Bye.